Hello, everyone. Welcome to the DnDebrief. We are the RPGeeks, and this is our science chat show. So we play Dungeons and Dragons, and we talk about science. This week, it is mostly the talking about science, but it is all inspired by things that have happened in our Dungeons and Dragons adventures. We have a guest cat this week. It's a chat show. We're going to be interviewing the cat, asking them their opinions on various scientific topics.
It's not a fan of that.
So what we would usually do at this point is summarize the bits of the adventures that led to us picking whatever science topics we've picked. And Ali, you're going first, Ali? Is that right?
So
but
I think.
Why do you sound so unsure?
It's a general feeling. I think what happened last time was that because you guys ended up in a cave, right? Through no fault of mine, I might add. And there were cave centipedes, right? And then Simon, you found a picture of them, and they were just. Oh,
and horrible. You kept leaning into your mic and going. That was it. That was the sound.
So yeah, and they were chasing you. They sort of came for you, and then more came, and more and more, and that was what happened. But you guys escaped, and then from that, because they kept going.
Stop it.
It works. It's like provoking a reaction right now.
Yeah, the question was, why don't certain noises make you pee your pants? Very American expression, that, isn't it? Like, I would say, why you piss yourself, right?
Why did that sound like the voice
chills up your spine?
Okay. What should we go with? Pee your pants?
Pee your pants.
So
Let's just say it, but like in a normal voice.
Pee pants, like you pee pants.
I would say piss yourself. Yeah, you're right, Ali. That is but
because
we're very polite people, so we wouldn't ever say.
It's a really emotional thing, especially if you're like a 30-year-old dude and you piss yourself. It's a real like.
When did you say the last time you pissed your pants was?
When was the last time I pissed my pants?
Why would we need to know that?
Like, I'm wondering if it is.
Why would we want to know that?
Digit age.
It's not relevant because no one in the episode peed at all.
You never pee in D&D. That's actually
there's
true.
no peeing in D&D. This is a fantasy world.
Wait, what happens to the urea? Because you eat. Like, there's a toxin.
To be fair, there's a lack of eating. It just kills
you, right? Urea is really toxic. It just builds up in your bloodstream, and then they all die. That's why all campaigns end.
Oh.
Yeah, all campaigns have to come to an end because their protagonist is dying from urea poisoning.
That's a little DM secret for you there.
D&D facts.
Hashtag D&D facts.
I thought, Ali, that your topic was going to be generally things that provoke a sort of physiological response, not just peeing specific. But
we'll get there. We'll get there. No, I was given a specific brief.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, my mistake.
Pee pants is that brief. So, right. And it is really interesting because the first thing you must understand is that the whole peeing or weeing like command comes from the Pontine. Yeah, it's the Pontine Micturition Center.
That's not a real thing.
That sounds like a hill in Rome.
It sounds like a Borg maturation chamber.
It probably is the hill in Rome, like it's there, or like the Pontiff's Micturiation Center is a different. So, and that's the pons is like a pons means bridge in Latin, right? And it's like a sort of bridge between your medulla, which is the base of your brain, and the sort of slightly more interesting stuff which happens above it. I think is why it's called that.
It's a bit of your brain.
Yeah, it's a bit of your brain, right? It's very near the sort of brainstem bit, so it's not very complicated. And it does simple stuff like telling you whether you should piss or not. And
that's useful.
So yeah, thought that through. And so what happens is it's connected by neurons to the bladder, the old bladder sac. And that's got mechanoreceptors in it, right? Which sense stretch. So as the bladder fills up, it literally is like you are stretching a bag, and these receptors they signal it when it gets too stretched.
Where else do you have mechanoreceptors? I've never heard of that.
Oh, you've got them everywhere. Anywhere that you can sense physical change. So pretty much everywhere.
So is that what informs? Oh, is it proprioception, where you know where bits of your body are?
Yeah. So there's specific ones in the muscles, which is it the muscles and the tendons? I can't remember, but they're certainly in the muscles, which are called spindle receptors, I think. And what they basically do is they sense stretch. So if you overstretch, you know that feeling when you're like, oh God, that's too far. They sense that, but also the stretching of your muscles tells you roughly where your body is in comparison to, the rest of itself, which is what proprioception is. If this muscle is stretched, my arm must be out.
Because I did an engineering internship when I was an undergrad at a company that made encoders, which are the mechanical electronic versions of that. Like they're the things that actually allow you to know how far along a scale like a piece is or how far it's rotated or something. And I don't know why, but I never ever considered the fact that there is probably a biological, version of that. I just in my head was like, oh yeah, of course the body knows where it is, but like any sensation, any signal in your brain has to be communicated somehow, I guess. So we have biological encoders.
I mean, the crazy thing is so all neurons, because they're just fragile little cell babies. Like if you stretch them physically or poke them, you will set them off. So any cell, any neuron is basically a mechanoreceptor, but there are specific neurons which exist to be stretchified, and they have special channels in them as well, which allows them to do that.
Your brain is quite easily confused by the position of your bodies, though, because there are various experiments which you can trick your brain. For example, like putting a fake hand. You've seen that one where you sit at a desk and they put a rubber hand on the table in front of the participant, and there's like a wall, and after a while you there's more to it than this, but you basically, your brain is sort of tricked into thinking that rubber hand is your hand, and then they whack it with a hammer and you go, ah! Or I'm thinking like amputees having sort of phantom sensations.
I think that's what's so cool about the brain, right? Is that because it's got so many different ways of doing things, and it's got so much whatever that word is when you can things can go wrong and the system will still function.
Redundancy.
Yes, It's got so much redundancy, right? There's so many different ways of answering this, solving problems, that sometimes the ways conflict with each other, which is what happens in those sort of illusions. So like it's your higher brain going, you can see it, it's got to be there, and like just being like, shut up to your proprioception.
I read today the most unusual example of phantom limb thing, by the way, because I think when we say phantom limb, we mean like somebody who's had the leg amputated or their hand amputated and they still feel sensations in what used to be their body part. And I read on Twitter today, there was a woman who'd lost a breast to cancer and she'd had it removed. And in the years subsequently, when she felt a cold breeze specifically, she'd feel her phantom nipple harden.
Oh no.
Which is just like the weird, because it's there, I don't know, a couple of inches above your chest, but like there's just a tingling, but it's a point. It's a specific point that you're aware of. I just never heard of that before.
Peculiar.
But you've got to, I mean, because, the nerve fiber will still be there, right? It's like, so you've got to assume that, what?
No.
And also, like you...
This is Emily in chat. Solar Emily saying the phantom of the areola.
The
10 out of 10. I love that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I was just getting a lot of... Yeah. This is a dangerous path to walk. We walk a dangerous path.
Anyway, peeing yourself.
Yes. Anyway, peeing yourself. Pissing your pants. Right. Anyway, so the Pontine Micturition Center, right? That's like the button. That's the brain button, which is like, boom, go, void bladder, get rid of all that urine or whatever's in there.
The big red button on the wall of the brain.
Exactly. It's like that meme with the dude looking at the two buttons, both of which say piss yourself. That's essentially all that Pontine Micturition does.
It's the missing scene from Inside Out. It's the bit they don't show with all the cute little emotions, and then there's just like the bladder guy. Look at me. It's time. Do I go?
Would have been a great character.
Not now.
Such a good film.
And when he gets surprised, he's like shocked. He's like, ah! And then it backs into the button.
Yeah, it's like the room is really small and the buttons are really big. Like, so he's like,
And as
Don't get jolted.
as the person gets older, like the room gets bigger and you get more control.
Yeah, and then as you get really old, you lose some of that control. You end up having to lean on the button when you're tired. Anyway, right.
What does the character design of this person look like? That's what I want to know.
I sort of imagine.
Can you explain it from now on? Imagining button guy is there, using that analogy.
I sort of imagine him a
Tell
bit
us
like
more.
a sort of bladder. Like he's sort of a bit. He's like a
whoopee
bit
cushion.
like a condom that's filled with water.
Oh.
You know, sort of inflated
yeah.
and a bit sort of like wobbly.
Oh.
I don't know. You do yours. That's mine.
He lives in a pontoon metaphilication brain.
He does. He lives in the Pontine Micturition Centre, Shamini.
There are no sharp edges. That's the other thing. Everything in this is perfectly rounded.
Yeah, exactly. And lots of things that look like the button, but aren't the button as well. Like just it's sort of like decoration, which is sort of similar.
One of them is the light switch.
A
Identical.
lot of time it's quite dark in there. Yeah, exactly.
Neuroscience, Ali, bring it back to the neuroscience, please.
Yeah, I was looking for a segue and it wasn't forthcoming. So let's just dive straight back in. Right, so you've got the Pontine Micturition Centre, which is the button. But the thing is, that's connected to other parts of the brain, right? So
Why?
well, yeah. Well, why exactly? So it's connected to, amongst other things, the hypothalamus, which is it's part of the limbic system. That doesn't explain what it does. Basically, the hypothalamus is generally in charge of sort of controlling your body temperature, like the release of certain hormones, just sort of general housekeeping shit that goes on in your body. That's important, but sort of fairly simple. Anyway, so the hypothalamus has connections to the Pontine Micturition Centre. And according to this article that I read, I've not studied this in detail, right? It wasn't what I did my PhD on. However, I'm going to go with it because I trust it. What happens is as you emotional information gets fed indirectly into the hypothalamus, right? So your emotional state stimulates the hypothalamus to do stuff like release adrenaline or whatever. And the stimulation of the hypothalamus can trigger stimulation of the Pontine Micturition Centre, right? So if you get a massive emotional shock, or even just like an increase in emotional like tone, then you will increase the activity in the hypothalamus, and then that will lead to an increase in activity in the Pontine Micturition Centre, which will lead you to piss yourself because it's getting contradicting information saying void now, void.
Which is presumably part of the fight or flight response. If something happens, you need to be as light as possible in order to run.
This was what I was
away from the.
It's not just humans, right? Like animals do this. Animals, if they're being
freaking
captured.
sheep! You go into a field. Sorry, they're sheep. The sheep look at you, and they just you got to them. They just pee, and then they leave.
But like,
can't even look at them.
How
They
do you
pee.
know that?
you know, animals under duress generally, I think there must be an evolutionary response to I am slightly more likely to get away if I am slightly lighter.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can prove that or if there's like any real. I mean,
they totally do.
What would it
They're all
be?
peeing all over the place.
You know, you thought maybe it could be pheromonal, or you're like, I'm gonna cover my tracks by making everything stink, or, you know, but that's ridiculous.
I disappear in a
So
cloud
don't
of
even
urine.
think about it. Disappear in a cloud of urine. Yeah,
I
exactly.
suppose it can be off-putting as well. Some
the
some animals
skunk,
just
right?
poop on you as well.
The evolutionary pressure is hoping that predators just go, ugh.
Ugh.
Oh, gross.
I mean, yeah. That's
I was going to
crazy.
eat this guy, but he's a bit damp. No.
Like
this
slow
whole place is a
worms
bit damp.
will poop on you if you're not careful. There's loads of things that'll just poop on you. You gotta watch out.
Yeah,
Common in the
I
animal
don't know
world.
I don't know if the poop thing is the same, but
I think that's quite gross out smelling. Like, oh, this doesn't smell like food.
I mean,
That's
presumably
a
that
good
also has,
defensive mechanism.
you know, mechanoreceptors, so you know, like, what your sphincter is doing, or, you know, what the, you know, internals of your
sphincters.
intestines are doing, right?
yeah, loads of sphincters. I assume.
So we get an emotional reaction and we're like, oh,
Yeah.
maybe I'll pee now. That'd be nice.
So, and apparently that's why, just before you're about to perform, lots of people, or about to run a marathon, lots of people find that they need to go for a wee.
Usefully.
I definitely do that. Yeah, always like, oh, the pre-show wee.
But then, interestingly, whilst you're doing something like a half marathon or a marathon or a show, you are not aware of it at all.
Suddenly don't need
You are not
to
weeing,
at all
are you?
for like the
That's
whole
not happening.
high adrenaline time, because you don't want to. So you don't want to wee while you're running away from the lion, just before.
So that is connected to the frontal cortex, which also has connections to the pontine micturition center, and that's an inhibitory connection, right? So you can think yourself, no, you shut now, bladder. And that's like, so that's the sort of the yin yang of.
In the analogy
bladder.
with button guy, who's the frontal?
I imagine
cortex?
frontal cortex bloke is like quite uptight and
The manager.
has glasses, is probably a bit bald, right? And is probably an upper middle management,
Yeah.
but like, and it's like, oh, I'm a bit stressed. Can you just please? But through the door, right? No one comes into the room. They're just like, Brian, like that sort of.
Okay, good.
I'm imagining.
I understand it now.
I'm imagining that Bladder Man, as we're now apparently calling this person, is just like, he sounds like he's constantly eating a bit too much, and he's just like, oh, please, we need to get rid of this. Something. Well, and this originally came from Twitch chat, and there is a follow-up question here from Emily in chat asking what causes the pee dance. So this is when you get the tippy tappies and like you want
That's
to.
That's a great question. That's such a good question.
In the room with Pee Man, like Bladder Man, presumably there are other buttons that also control muscles, and whilst just like flailing around.
If you hit the other,
what about
muscles.
this? What about if it's actually because when you do the pee dance, like when you scratch an itch, what you're doing is you're sort of activating all the stuff around it.
Yeah.
The pee dance is like activating all your
like
body.
Running
like,
interference on the inputs and just like throwing a load of other inputs on it to detract from the signal. Bury it in noise.
Which is why it has that sort of duality, doesn't it? Because you're like, must do the pee dance helps. But then you're also like, every time I land on my feet, I make the pee dance a bit worse because it pushes the bladder.
That's an interesting hypothesis, actually. I don't know if any pee scientists in chat.
if they were going to be anywhere. Anyway, so
thanks.
But so there's actually a condition called shy bladder, which is where your connections from your frontal cortex, your inhibitory connections, are too strong, and they stop you from weeing, except in the most wee-friendly of situations.
It's like the psychology is overcoming the physiological need.
This is the situation of like you're at a urinal, there's a guy next to you, and you find yourself like you're overthinking it. This person's going to watch me pee. Like. I can't. I've got performance anxiety.
This person's here to judge my peeing. He's probably from the bureau. I should pee really well.
The pee bureau? No. Why did I go for the trough? This guy's like a couple of inches too close.
I could have walled off at a urinal. I could have, but not now. I wonder if it affects men like proportionally more than women, because
this sounds terrible. Oh my god. Oh my god. Cubicles are great.
Am I holding it in the regulation way?
Oh god. That sounds very stressful.
The stress of if you come to a like urinals are great. You know where you're at with a urinal. But like if you've got the pee trough, with the
urinal, you still have to decide which one.
Am I too close to that person? Do I need to just still space?
What if there's...
You don't decide. You leave one urinal gap.
What if it's like the tube and you're trying to leave a one-on-one gap and then you realise that person there has left a two gap and messed it up and then you're going to have to go on one of those two. Which one do you pick?
It's incredibly difficult and it's hurtful.
That's the correct
answer. Bail on the whole situation. Yeah, fair. Okay.
But like, I mean, there is a moment like...
If you go for the trough... literally terrible. There's a function there of how busy is the bathroom, how quickly do I need to turn over, how like large, like am I wearing winter layers, like there are all these factors that you need to go into and then find a distance.
But when sometimes, especially in like clubs and things, you can sometimes get a cue to the urinal, right? And then you have the added pressure, which is rare for a man, that you have a time limit on weeing as well. And it's a whole extra set of problems.
So basically, if you have the link between the frontal cortex and the papal maturation Sorry, that's where popes get old.
Where the popes are born. They emerge from their cocoons like larvae.
Yeah, the pontiff's palace or whatever the fuck this thing's called. Like that, if those connections are too strong, that's what causes that reluctance to pee, or the inability to pee.
No, so if the frontal cortex.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah.
Oh.
That's the Anyway, so so I was thinking, right, and so the noises which make you pee your pants, obviously, if they're a kind of scary noise, then that's going to trigger the hypothalamus. Trigger that reaction could trigger you to just wee everywhere. Oh god. But before I get into like what noises are scary, right? Because I felt like that was the obvious place to go after this. Like, what makes a noise scary? I did also think, well, if there's noise that can make you wee yourself, surely there's noise that can make you poo yourself, right? Which is the brown note.
The brown note. I've heard of this.
Everybody's heard of the brown note.
That doesn't sound real.
There is a YouTube video of it.
Of course,
I tried it.
Not only have you tried it, we're all about to try it because I've got it.
Oh no!
Wait, hang on.
I'm about to share.
I'm gonna just undo my trousers on the off chance they need to come off very quickly. Okay. Shoot.
Okay. Well, we've got 17 minutes of Google ads, so amuse yourselves for now. Get like a plate or a casserole dish or something, whatever you need, and then let's get ready to appreciate this noise. But just
welcome to the new viewers of the DnDebrief, the high quality science podcast.
We didn't vet these topics in advance.
Hang on. Yeah. Well, it's
Have you done a video on it, Simon? I feel like it's the kind of thing that you would do a video on.
This is a biology thing. It's all too wet and squishy for me.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, it's really wet and squishy. Okay, ready?
Yeah. Ooh, it's low and vibrating.
Right, actually quite nice.
This sounds like the intro to a 1995's Microprose game. Like, this is setting the scene.
16-bit. Poo yourself. Shall I just leave this
it's
on?
Lots of different notes. It's cheating. It's a whole soundscape.
I know. And therein, I think you have it. Because it's not real, right?
No.
The brown note apparently originated from a spoof New Scientist article in the 70s.
Right? Like an April Fool's joke or something.
Yeah, I don't know I don't know why they wrote it, but yeah, it was a spoof. And it sort of has become like taken up by popular culture. Now people believe it. There's no evidence for it.
So this is like a classic example of when debunking is needed. Like, how do you debunk the brown note?
Been debunked so many times. Mythbusters did it, but it's too good an idea to go.
Even though the truth is obvious, and you play it to somebody and they don't shit themselves, they still believe it. Seemingly.
But I feel like I could if I wanted. If I really tried, I probably could.
Like, my dad told me a story about how the French riot police created a cannon which sounded off this note and used it on a whole bunch of, like, French protesters. And he 100% believed that story. And I believed it up until the point where I had to research for this particular podcast. And I still half believe it. But
you're like, but maybe.
Wow.
That's amazing. So, but like, are we going to debunk everything? Because you went, whatever. Wait, do the noise. But I didn't pee myself, so is it really possible for sounds to stop it? Okay, but just stop it though. I'm fine, but just stop.
So what I didn't do, what I should have done, is to look at why some sounds make you shiver, because that's a real thing, isn't it? I don't know.
Yes, I thought that's. Like, I really assumed that's what this was going to be, because that seemed obvious to me. Not
don't know why you assume that.
There's a variety of physiological responses, right? You've got the ones like fingers on chalkboard or something. Doesn't make you shiver, but it just makes you like tense up. And there's like the videos we've played them to each other of stuff like Feel Good Inc., but like the instruments are one beat out or something, and it makes you go ugh, like it's a physical response to it. And some of them, like, there's one that's like September by Earth, Wind and Fire, but the vocals are half a beat out and they're a semitone off. I hear it and it, like, I can't process anything else. Like, my brain is totally occupied with processing this signal.
I think Tim Minchin has a number in which he switches to singing like a semitone off every so often, which is just actually quite an amazingly skillful thing to be able to sing not in key, and it's just the slight jarring every so often.
I don't know. I've known plenty of tenors that can do it very naturally.
Now is the time to come out to you, Simon. I am a tenor, as you can probably tell from the tenor of my voice, right? And have always been so.
Oh my gosh.
This will not stand.
Wait, what are you, Simon?
I'm a baritone, preferring
Barry.
normally a bass.
Oh.
yeah. Just
Wait,
gotta
hang
move
on,
as
do we-
We're
far
gonna
as
form
you
a-
can.
We have a
really need
quartet
to
between us.
Me and Bates are both altos, but I could probably persuade Bates to sing at least a mezzo.
Well, we out to get out of this
Yeah.
discussion, so we can.
Gonna do a quartet. It's gonna be great. Okay,
Brilliant.
anyway.
Let's talk about. Should we talk about why noises are scary? How do you feel about that? Do you guys want to hear about it? Do you want to hear some more
Yeah, I
noises?
want to know about this.
Yeah, like, oh, are we gonna hear them? Oh, oh, we have an audio medium. It makes perfect sense. But yes,
Let me see if
please.
this is the right one. I mean, this is all. It's all a bit of a
We never
gamble.
stop.
Ah!
Oh,
Because,
advert.
It's a YouTube ad.
No,
The
get
YouTube-
back!
I do wonder, you know that chicka chicka sound? Don't do it, but you know that sound that you do when you did the centipede? No, don't. Ali, don't do it. Don't do it.
Very happy to
Like-
not have headphones.
I don't think I would have a reaction to that if we hadn't, like, if I hadn't embodied a character who spent a whole episode trying to, spoilers, like, fight off giant centipedes. Like, it's experiential as well.
I mean, yeah, like the musical, memory and those sort of emotional memory is what you're talking about, I think.
Okay.
Which is a PTSD thing, which I also came up in my researching, that when you make, because you can make strong fear memories associated with noises, right?
Okay, yeah.
But in PTSD, what happens is you start to overgeneralize, right? So it's no longer the specific noise which makes you afraid. It's all noises that sound like that.
Mm.
And then, this is crazy, you actually start hearing those noises as the original noise that you were terrified of, right? Like, you
Oh.
can't hear new noises anymore. You can only hear the old noise,
Oof.
right? You
Huh.
you physically can't hear it. It's incredible. I think they did it on mice, right? Just caveat that. But still, I was like, Jesus, you actually lose.
So the brain
different.
basically says we need to listen out for this trigger. This trigger means danger, and then
It's a sensible association to learn.
the
Beware of
sensitivity
this.
of that just gets higher and higher and higher because you're like, I know the danger's out there. Maybe that thing is actually the danger.
Yeah, you're like, it's more like the fearful part of the memory starts latching itself onto other noises, and then after that, yes, you're right. Like the I don't know how to describe it really, but yes,
Which also explains why the kind of reactions we're talking about to sounds tend to be things that are disgusting and things that are scary, because those are things that we are evolutionarily primed to be on the lookout for. Whereas, the sound of a log fire burning and autumn leaves crunching are all very nice, but they don't quite have the same viscerality.
Well, a phrase that I think is quite pithy, but also is quite true, is that love is what we're born with, hate is what we learn. And perhaps that actually kind of applies here, in that, like, the learned responses are so much more powerful because they've been picked up through negative experiences. Like, the positive ones don't leave such a mark because your brain's presumably just like, oh yeah, nice, I remember nice, this is good.
You don't need to, your survival isn't as dependent on it, perhaps.
Yeah.
I wonder if, like, you would wonder if the thing you're calling nice is basically obsession but dialed down. If you're like, actually, because if you think something is really, really nice, you stop labeling it as nice and you start labeling it as essential for my survival, right?
Well, then it's like a Pavlovian response, right? Like, that is the sound of, if you get addicted to, I don't know, having tinnies, like the sound of cracking a cold one open immediately makes you like salivate and makes you want one. Like, and that's, I suppose, a positive example of like a learned behavior. Well, maybe not that positive.
Depending, yeah. Play us some good sounds, Ali. What was that?
Coyote or something?
Like a crow? That was something on the plains.
It was a baby fox crying.
Was it? Foxes. Oh my
that
god.
was supposed to be a scary noise, but
it was quite scary.
I really should have listened to it again before playing it.
I had to reassure the scouts when we did our summer camp a couple of weeks ago, and there were owls in our field.
Oh, cool.
And so, getting to tell them, like, so, you've probably heard the like the kind of like tawny owl sound. But then, like, just so you know, in the middle of the night, you might occasionally hear a and And that's like a sound a barn owl makes. Like, it's a horrific sound.
Really?
Barn owls
Oh my
sound
gosh.
terrifying.
I assumed it was
Can
going
you
to be
do it
like
again?
screech owl because you know.
The
presumably
screech
they would
owls, I think, are really
screech,
high
but-
pitched, whereas barn owls just sound like
Oh.
someone screaming. They literally just sound like someone screaming.
Oh, but I mean, yes, I was going to say foxes. Anyone who lives in London or urban places, like they are right outside my bedroom window doing whatever fun things that I'm sure they're having a great time, sounding like people being murdered. So it's just like children and cats and screams and yeah.
But there are certain sounds that we are primed to like have a response to, like babies crying. Is that correct? That we have a physiological response to babies crying.
So I did not. Hang on, I've got a barn owl here. Just hold up.
Oh, there's the barn owl.
Right? It's horrible.
Oh,
You got to steal that for a D&D monster, Ali. That's great. Yeah, that was proper. That's good. I like that.
too much
But
phlegm.
also, remember that like they might be making this noise as they are swooping over you. And what you hear is like in the middle of the night whilst you're in a sleeping bag.
Barn owls are famously crepuscular, Simon.
Yes, sorry, not in the middle of the
It's
night.
biologically inaccurate.
I do love the word
Scenario.
crepuscular. Any chance to use that? Big fan.
Right, so the scary noise.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why they're scary, what makes a
Yeah.
noise scary, is the non-linearity of it. So that means, right, if you put in if you put in an input into something, then if the output goes up the same amount as the input goes up, right? So as you increase the input, you're increasing the output. Sorry, this is a stupid.
What
explanation.
input?
It's like a
Well,
constant
You're playing a
term.
What?
You're playing a flute, right?
Okay.
You blow into one end, you get a noise out the other end.
Yeah.
And then you blow harder, you get a louder noise, right? And the harder you blow, the louder the noise, and it's basically linear, the relationship between them, right?
Yeah.
So non-linearity is when you blow so hard that the noise gets all fucked up.
You'd only know the input if you were playing the flute, right? So what's non-linearity in terms of just output if you didn't know the input?
Well, it means that whatever was making the noise,
Yeah.
that's actually a really good question. I don't
Is it
know.
like it couldn't have physiologically been made by like normal lungs? There's something like it's inhuman. You know that humans don't work that way to have been able to make that sound, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's like if you put so much pressure into something that it's not working the way that it should, like it's producing noise, but also it's producing sort of excess nasty shit, which is coming from this like putting too much through. And that's the non-linearity, right? Because instead of being a nice linear thing, as you put masses in, you're not getting the same sort of linear thing out. But
And that's
anyway,
creepy. That's scary.
and that is has been linked to making you feel uncomfortable and scared, and that is in animal distress calls, possibly in that barn owl noise,
No way.
and in certain kinds of baby cries,
Ooh.
which is why certain baby crying is really grim.
But like, am I right in saying that generally speaking, we find low frequencies scary because they mean big animal, and then we find higher frequencies we want to like care for, and we find them cute because they're like babies' cries?
I don't know anything about that. I would have said that barn owl was pretty high pitched and it was fucking awful. So
I feel like that's true within a sort of limited range of human vocalization type things. But it probably can be overcome by horrific screeching.
Maybe that's
is
non-linearity though coming into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's not like about the pitch, it's about the shape of the sound wave. But there is like a lowness thing. So this is my last fact. It's a good one. Sub 20 hertz, right? So below the audible range of hearing.
We can't hear that. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that has been found on some people, like on a proportion of the population, to trigger feelings of unease, anxiety, heart rate increase, sweaty palms, that kind of stuff.
Genuinely. So you can't hear anything. You can't tell when it's on and when it's off, and yet people are just like, "Ooh."
Yeah. So it's
a bit worried.
They use it in scary films to create a sense of unease.
They're manipulating us.
Right? There is this idea that because lots of stuff can make those 20 hertz noises, like natural stuff, like wind blowing through things. And there's this idea that haunted places that people think are haunted are actually, they get that sensation because there's a natural thing creating this noise, which they can't hear, but they've sensed this uneasiness in them.
I like that.
That's
great.
cool.
I like that. Good
So
theory.
anywhere that you step in, you're like, this feels bad. If it's like a Fangorn forest kind of vibe, and you're like, probably the 20 hertz thing. Yeah, that's fine.
That's
it's definitely
amazing.
not good.
I'll just keep going. Yeah. I'll just drop down the screen. No worries.
Fine, yeah.
Look,
Someone says, I have a bad feeling about this. And the other people are like, don't worry, it's science. Everything's fine.
as you're being
Carry
carried
on.
off by like a chainsaw wielding maniac, because you're like, don't worry, there's a 20 hertz thing. Let me explain.
The RPGeeks told me all about it. We're fine.
The RPGeeks are not responsible for any deaths that may be incurred due to listening to this podcast. Well, actually, talking about very low frequencies leads into what I wanted to talk about very neatly.
Oh, it's a segue.
We are on two wheels, wheeling electrically across your ears like this. That's us segueing from one section to another.
That was good.
So basically, in the last couple of episodes, we sort of had these instances of being able to communicate with characters whilst they were deep in the mines. We don't know exactly how deep, but deep underground. Emily's character Infinity was able to get a signal through, and then later on was not able to. And this got me looking into how do you communicate through solid rock. My initial thought was, first time ever, but I think Ali may have made a mistake here. I feel like that shouldn't have happened, but turns out it's a bit more interesting than that. So my first thought was it might be kind of an evanescent phenomenon, which definitely led me to do a lot of research whilst listening to Evanescence. And this was something that I encountered when I was doing my undergrad, that basically happens when you have like an electromagnetic wave, like a radio wave, or it could be any frequency, impacting into a medium that it can't propagate through. Then you can measure an evanescent wave on the other side, which is a decaying electromagnetic signal that if you average it over, because obviously it's a wave, it goes up and it goes down over a course of a cycle. If you average over a wave cycle going through the material, the net flux is zero. It's not pushing energy through it. But there's a decaying solution to the equations that describe electromagnetic fields that goes through the substance. And
hang on, so
you've lost me.
You can sense this thing out. So if you didn't know what was going in, you could sense that shit out the other side.
You could put a detector for, relatively shallow into the material, practically. You could put in something that will sense electromagnetic fields and you will pick up a decaying solution. And it's something that I actually did in my undergrad. We did a lab where we measured this.
Wait, so you're saying the electromagnetic radiation cannot travel through the object?
Yeah, so the energy is being absorbed into the object.
Okay.
But then there's basically a net zero flux, if that makes sense. Like there is a signal that's moving into it, but it's not actually transporting energy with it. It's a decaying solution to the wave equation. So it satisfies this need that the solution is zero, infinitely far from your boundary, and it has a wave input at the boundary. And
so here I am sitting on the other side of like a hotel wall, right? And I want to know if the bloke next to me has got his light on. And all I have to do is stick a little probe into the wall itself, and I could tell.
And what are you measuring?
You'd be measuring electrical magnetic field strength.
Okay.
Because that's ultimately what EM radiation is.
Okay.
But yes, but it depends on the frequency. I can't remember exactly the dependency, but I'm pretty sure the lower the frequency, the further it penetrates in. So stuff like light, because it's got a very very short wavelength, doesn't penetrate very far at all. So,
and is this limited by the thickness of the material and even the width of the material?
Well, it depends what the material is made of, because effectively what determines if a wave can pass through material is the configuration of electrons in it. So if it's not just an element, it's the bands that appear in its molecular structure. But exactly the same as when glass is transparent to light, because it turns out that the visible wavelengths of light have an energy associated with each photon of light that doesn't match a band gap, and so it just goes straight through. Whereas other forms of radiation, like I'm just going to pick something like infrared, for example, would be absorbed by it because it does match that gap. But yeah, basically what the material is will determine how far it can penetrate, and the wavelength of the incident where light can also determine how far it penetrates in. So
What's
I
that got to do with the excellent band Evanescence?
unfortunately.
Hang on, wait a second. Before we get to that, can I ask? So back in the mine, right? So if
Fine.
there was so they had these little sort of slates which seemed to be picking up some sort of message, right? So if that message if it was an electromagnetic wave which was being blasted at sufficient strength into the rock wall, then and it was at the right wavelength to go through the rock and any other bits of rock that it found, then in theory you could pick it up on the other side from these decaying wavelengths.
In theory, you could, and in practice, they do this in mines.
What? Real mines?
There's something called through the earth, or TTE, mine communications, where basically they use ultra low frequencies of EM radiation. So they say between 300 and 3,000 hertz, that penetrate through up to 2,500 feet of rock. Like, you can actually penetrate really quite far down into a mine using this. But it's like very specific to set up. Basically, you have to set up a coil of wire that goes around like the perimeter of your mine, and then, you know,
to create
blast a
huge
signal through that.
Oh wow! Okay.
But there are different systems that actually do this in real life. Like, there was one that's called Telemag that has been used and done some tests. It's not actually that much material out there about this, so don't know how well used this is, but like, you know, practically there is a reason to not have wired communications in a mine, because if stuff goes wrong, it could get crushed, blah, blah, blah. So there is actually a market for this kind of thing.
So I want you guys to remember, this makes so much sense. And obviously I knew this when creating what's about to happen, but I just want you to remember this conversation.
Okay.
Next week.
I'm remembering the large dome that covered the mine, and how it could be a sort of coil or dish type thing.
Well, I think
that's
I tried
freaking amazing.
I think I tried to work out the wavelength of it, and it turned out to be something like, I think you need like a few kilometers of wire in order to do this. Like, that would need to be the wavelength of the thing. So it'd be a big coil.
Huge.
Wait, hang on. I don't understand. So
because basically the size of the coil is what determines the wavelength that the lowest frequency that you can transmit, right? Like, and
okay,
also,
I feel like such a dumbass, but can you just tell me, why does a coil of wire transmit electromagnetic radiation?
So an electromagnetic wave is just a varying electric and then magnetic field, right? Those two are coupled together because James Clerk Maxwell. And basically, if you
it's just an electron moving through a magnetic field.
Well, so if you punch an electron in motion, any electric charge that moves creates a magnetic field. So if you generate a regular current of like a coil of electrons moving through it, that will generate a repeating magnetic wave that also then generates a repeating electric wave, and those two go in tandem together.
You have to use either your right hand or your left hand to calculate it. It's very important that you know which one it is. I don't know which one it is, but I know it's very important.
Yes, I can't. It's been a long time since I thought that.
But you've got these masses.
But so basically, yeah. You if you want to send a very low frequency signal, you need to generate you need to have a very large transmitter. In the same way, if you want to receive, for example, radio waves from wherever in the cosmos, you need a large radio telescope, and the telescope has to be large in order to detect the radio waves. Because you have to have, basically, the telescope has to be the size of one wavelength in order to determine that there is a wave.
So does the wave move electrons around the wire in the telescope, and then you measure that?
I believe I've not really done very much on receivers, but I think that is basically how it works. Like, you have a wave that then pushes electrons around, and you detect that pushing of electrons as a current.
That's great. That's like 19th century technology.
Yeah.
What are we doing with this in our observatories? Come on now.
But apparently they've been using this TTE stuff since like the 60s. Like, it's actually been around for quite a while. I just never heard of this before.
Fucking switched on in the 60s, weren't they?
But the other thing that they picked up was it's the same technology that they used to communicate with submarines, because seawater, because it's salty, is actually quite opaque to most forms of electromagnetic radiation, because
Wow.
when you push the wave through, it starts moving. Because it's conductive, electrons can move around through it more easily because of the salt.
So it sort of sucks energy out of the wave by being like,
Yeah.
you're moving all my electrons.
So it's a lossy medium technically. And basically they used the same thing of using, I think they went down to extremely low frequencies, not just ultra low, but extremely low, to communicate with submarines at depth. Basically, it was like a thing.
The level at which you sing,
Cool.
Simon.
So that was the kind of my first thought. But it turns out there is another way that you can transmit information through solid rock, and kilometers.
Can I just ask? Sorry, on the seawater absorbance. Sorry, Shams, did you want to?
No.
You can say
No.
the seawater absorbance thing. Is that why certain wavelengths travel further down into the sea than other ones? Because it's blue that
You mean
travels
with visible light?
with visible light. Yeah, it's blue that travels farthest, right? Because it's highest energy. Is that correct?
Which way around it is?
It isn't the highest energy. It's the higher energy,
Compared to red within the visible spectrum.
Possible energy.
Well, as in indigo and violet, the purpley ones are technically.
Isn't it the deeper that you go? Oh,
The deeper
And
you
red
go,
is
the
the-
bluer it gets, I believe.
And the red is the longer
deeper it's-
wavelength.
the redder.
So
Oh wait, no, sorry, the other way around.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
so
deeper you go, the redder things look because they are.
the less blue that you get coming through, I think.
The deeper you go, the less blue you see.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because I think it's the
projecting
higher
this.
frequencies that get attenuated first, and then
Oh, of course, you're totally right, because that's why you're going down to extremely low frequency to be able to. Okay, yeah, I'm with you. Thank you.
So that was that. But then, there is another thing which I kind of wrote off in my head as just being completely impossible. But
So you've ruled out. I want to try and figure out, because when you said I want to work out how to communicate through solid rock, so you've kind of covered electromagnetic radiation.
Yeah.
And your answer is it can go through a bit. It has to be low frequency, and you have to blast it a lot.
yeah, it has to be quite a specialized setup in order for it to work.
And then I was thinking, what other kind of communications technologies are there? There's alpha radiation, which is particles, which is not going to get very far. It's sound waves could that would go well
It would,
through
but
rock.
you've got
Could you
the
just sort
same
of
problem
shout?
of being. You've got it's lossy, but in a more understandable way. It's lossy in the sense that sound waves are just the stuff moving, and naturally
Yeah.
you're going to have friction to that. So the signal gets weaker and weaker the further down you get.
Just because it expends energy moving stuff around and frictionizing.
The thing,
Electrons moving. I don't know. So what else is there? Because I feel like we're out of options
You're going to
at this
say
point.
you could send this signal through the entire planet, and
Neutrons.
it's neutrinos.
Oh, neutrinos. I meant.
Yeah!
I meant
But you couldn't pick up the signal. You'd be like,
Well-
hello, no one can hear me evermore.
go straight through your brain. You'd be like,
Japan
oh,
in
what
that
was a
big
neutrino?
box of neutrino goo.
I meant neutrinos. God damn
So
it.
basically, I thought that it would be impossible to detect, but in 2012, a group of scientists proved that you could do it. They proved that you can send a signal via creating neutrinos and then picking it up with one of these enormous detectors. Because for the dear viewers at home, neutrinos are subatomic particles that just don't do shit. They don't interact with anything. They are chargeless. They are almost entirely massless. And there's something crazy like 1 billion of them streaming through your thumbnail every second. It's an ungodly amount of them. And
when they build neutrino detectors, they have to go deep in the ground and build basically a big bath. I'm going to say. The signal is so small to detect a tiny neutrino that they have to block everything else out. If you've got a train going overhead that vibrates things, oh no, it's going to mess up your signal. And they might detect 1 or 2 tiny little blips of neutrinos out of all of the ones that are going through, because it has to they're tiny compared to the size of an atom, and it has to actually hit the actual, I don't know if I assume it's the nucleus of the atom itself, and atoms are actually mostly empty space.
Yep. It's
So
what was it? If an atom was the size of the Royal Albert Hall, the nucleus would be the size of a fly in the middle.
No way.
Great fact.
That's how
That's brilliant.
tiny nuclei are. But basically,
Solid
yeah,
factation.
this group of researchers sent neutrino signals, which you can create from nuclear interactions, through 210 meters of solid rock, and don't actually know how. Let me double check this. I'm not actually sure how they sent the signal, but basically they sent a signal that spelled out the word neutrino.
Oh, nerds.
Which is the nerdiest.
But do you
thing.
have to have a huge neutrino detector to detect it?
So
Yeah.
that's the downside. You'd
Oh,
have to
damn.
have a bath the size, like 50 meters across. But like, if
Is it
we're
filled
talking
with
about
like
a sci-fi
deuterium
universe.
or something?
Sorry.
Really heavy.
Is it filled with heavy water? Isn't that what they put in it to make the like nuclei bigger?
I think you
I'm just
might
making
be
shit up now.
right. Actually, I think it might be heavy water, but I cannot remember. I'll have to look that up. But basically, yeah, like the downside is you'd have to have one of these enormous detectors. But if we're imagining a sci-fi universe in which we are colonizing and terraforming other planets, it's entirely possible that if we actually understood neutrinos a bit better, and it turns out there's actually another there's another fundamental force that we've just been missing up until now, conceivably you could have a device that just picks up on neutrino flux. And
That's a great
Neutrino phone.
solution.
you'd have to subtract
Absolutely.
like the background
Phone.
noise of basically the star just going constantly.
Sorry, I can't. What was that? The star's really noisy today. Yeah.
But like you have to calibrate it every time you go into a new solar system. Like you just turn down the oh great, I can hear you.
I thought for a second it was a barn owl again. Like
yeah, the song is in fact a barn owl. But yeah,
That's
you could
awesome.
conceivably make it work through neutrinos. If we're saying in this universe
That
they
would
understood
be
how they
Such a
how
nice,
they work.
neat, a lovely, neat solution. Although Ali did get really excited about the huge emitter solution as well.
we could do both.
Referencing something that's about to happen. What does that mean?
Well, because the other thing is that two other things I suppose is that with the neutrinos it is infinite range, like because they go through literally everything.
Apart from our tiny neutrino detectors the size of a stone that we have in this universe.
And in the campaign Infinity, the deeper we went, she was unable to pick up signals, so I guess there's that.
Yeah.
The other thing was the through the earth stuff, the electromagnetic waves. Basically, I imagine it's because of the fact that it's so low frequency, it has a very limited bandwidth. Like they don't send video or pictures through this; they send simple text or
Yeah, because
on
that's all that you've picked up. Well, I suppose you've got audio, didn't you? You did get audio, so that's
audio.
more
How
than
does-
just simple text.
How does what is bandwidth and how does it relate to the frequency of the carrier wave?
Well, I think if you think about like, obviously there needs to be, it depends how you design the system and the redundancy in it, but effectively you need to determine if you're receiving data in a 1 or a 0 at a predetermined window. And so if you are, because you could say for each cycle, is it on or is it off? Is it in a high state or a high amplitude or low amplitude? But then that's like very, very difficult to keep track of. So let's say you sample 100, waves at a time. Then if you are at a high frequency, those 100 waves come very, very quickly. Like you can fit in tons of those 100 wave packets per second. Whereas if you're dealing with low frequency waves, you get fewer of those wave packets per second. So
It's just a time limitation. You can just deliver less
freaking
information
brilliant.
per second.
So you're
for
just
sending
measuring
video.
like wave peaks, essentially. That's your information
The
carrier.
presence or
Like,
absence
count the
of.
number
well,
wave
it's not so much
peaks.
the presence or absence. It's the fact that like they are high amplitude or low amplitude. Like
Right.
It's certainly in a digital system. That's what you're doing. You're looking for
So
a
the
voltage.
sensitivity of your detector would determine the amount of information that you could transmit on a wave, because it would determine how many gradations of amplitude you could measure within a wave.
Yeah, well, it would determine like how long a wave packet would need to be in order for you to be confident enough that it is a 1 or it is a 0.
But yeah, so we were only dealing in binary and digital. Why is it high and low amplitude? Why isn't the low amplitude off? Like what technical advantage is there to keeping the wave going but lower?
I'm not sure, to be quite honest. I imagine it's a limitation of actually how the transmitters work, but I'm not actually sure. This is an engineering problem. This is for the wire monkeys. I don't know how this stuff works.
Come on, wire monkeys. Surely you're out there.
We've got
This is
several
really
in
important.
our,
On a Wednesday
in our
night.
moderating team here today.
We finally got to the meat of the issue, and we don't know what the fuck we're talking about. Like, how has this happened?
How digital communications work. We've gone really basic here, Simon. Like I know you wanted to talk about clever things, but turns out
No.
I need bandwidth explained first. So
Sorry.
Yes, I make computers go burr.
Damn software engineers.
Oh, that's the notes from chat. Helpful chat.
So sure,
Thanks,
I
Jack.
know that is how it works in digital computers, that you are effectively looking for a high voltage or a low voltage. But I think because of the way that the components work, you don't ever get 0 voltage. It's going to be a background state or an elevated state, but it's not actually going to be 0. So I assume that it would be similar for this kind of digital communications, just wirelessly.
So presumably that's why you need such a fucking high to do your wake me up inside communications. You would need such a strong sensor or a high input, because it's very difficult to read the differences between the peaks and the troughs. So you're like, I'm going to have to read a shitload of these, or read them very well to get the signal.
And the further down, the deeper you go, the more difficult it becomes. Like, it'd be very easy towards the surface, but like, because it's an exponentially decaying solution, you know, if you have a good detector, you can go down further. If you have a cheap detector, you couldn't go down very far, and they'll pick it up.
This is wicked.
This might be a question for a future one, but I want to know, what if in the future we're not using ones and zeros? We've got the more complicated multiple, whatever you call
qubits.
it, system. Yeah. Oh no, not quantum. Oh god.
Yeah, we did a bit of quantum, didn't we, earlier? And
Oh
there's 8,
no.
isn't there?
I
There's
don't want
8
to know. I
possibilities for
regret.
each.
I retract all questions in which the answer is quantum. Like, oh.
But information theory itself is really interesting. Like, I don't know it well enough.
What's information
but, like,
theory?
well, that's what it's all comes. It's like, how much information can you cram into something, and what counts as information and what's not information, and therefore, you know, how much can you learn about a given thing? And I don't know. It's pretty badass, but I'm fucked if I can explain it.
No.
Sounds like
That's
we
very
are.
philosophical.
We need to put the floaties on, because we are out of our depth.
Very
Yeah,
much
there was a lot of
so.
hand waving going on, like actual hand waving.
Well, that's probably a good
Amazing.
point, I think, to wrap up that, because I feel like we actually got into the meat of both of those topics.
That was
quite
great.
nicely.
I've learnt a lot. Thank you.
As ever,
that
like,
educated.
in the process of doing this
Yes.
show, like, I have talked to people about the thing we talked about last time of dreams being your brain preventing overfitting. Like,
Such a
this
fun
is
idea.
this is
I
spilled out
love
into my
that.
private life, you know.
Yeah. It's one of
It's
those
so
cool little theories that's actually quite easy to grasp. Like, it's a fun fact to go with. It's doing very well on our TikTok. Join our TikTok at RPGeeks DnD on TikTok. We've got little clips, including a clip of the overfitted brain hypothesis explanation. We also post on Twitter about when we're going to stream and fun facts and creepy videos of cave centipedes.
Oh.
Sorry about that.
so grim. Maybe post the barn owl noise, because that was me.
Oh
Well,
yes.
you're the one with the power, Ali. You can do it.
But I might clip it from
Oh,
the,
I could do it. I could do it.
Do it.
This will take
Yeah.
me a while, but it'll happen.
Yeah.
Well, before that happens, we should probably actually wrap up. So thank you, everybody, for being here today on Twitch. For those of you who are listening to this after the fact, we stream this on Twitch on Wednesday evening, 7 p.m. UK time, and is obviously available elsewhere as a podcast and on YouTube. And as Shania said, the best bits, or the bits slightly above the average, are also available on TikTok. And are we putting them on Instagram? I can't remember.
I think most of them are on Instagram.
I do think that sometime soon, maybe after episode 10, we should do like a recap video of like the story thus
Ooh.
far, just so people can kind of jump in, because I imagine it is quite intimidating if you've not watched any of the adventure thus far to catch up on 12 hours or more of D&D.
And you've never heard of D&D and don't know how it's played.
Yeah.
We are also live every Wednesday, so if you're not catching us live right now, you can do so. Alternatively, if you are catching us live right now, why not try YouTube or a podcast? In fact, just
Everybody
watch the
switch.
show twice.
Everybody switch roles.
No, twice. I want
It
double
might
numbers.
be different. You don't know. We
I
do
will-
stuff to it in post.
We do. We
Right,
manipulate
we're
it.
floundering. I'm going to call the episode here. So thank you, Shamini and Ali, for joining me. We'll be back next week with some D&D actual play adventures, and hopefully some more interesting science that we'll run into. So thank you for watching, and bye, everybody.
Bye all.
Bye.